you. Welcome, everyone. It's great to see so many people join us. We've got some folks that have returned for Coffee with CoPeace that have been with us before, and I see some new faces. This might be your first time. So welcome. We're excited to have you. My name is Meg Maston. I'm the Chief Relationship Officer here at CoPeace. We are an impact investing holding company, and we're going to start off with just a little brief overview of who we are and what we do, and then we're going to jump into our guest speaker, Roman, who we're thrilled to have. I hope everyone is safe, both physically and mentally, and doing well. We are in our 4th month of the pandemic, which is hard to believe, and I don't see an end in sight. So we're going to be living this new normal for quite some time. So I hope that everyone is well. At CoPeace, we have been going through our first growth phase, which we just completed last month. We finished our private fundraising offering through our friends and family network, and we're excited to say we raised over $1.6 million during that first round, and then just recently moved into our next round, which I'm going to let Ed explain a little bit more about, but we are happy to share that we have been growing and doing well. I want to thank those of you on the call. I think we actually have several investors on the call. So just really appreciate everyone's support during the first phase of our company. So I'm going to turn over to Ed Tepper. Ed is based out of New Jersey. He's our Chief Operating Officer, and he'll take it from here. Go for it, Ed.
Thanks, Meg. Good morning or afternoon, depending on your time zone. It's great to see all of you here. It's been well over a month since I had coffee, just kidding. But since we've had our last coffee with CoPeace, which I really enjoy. It's great to see some familiar faces and to welcome the new faces here. As Meg mentioned, it's a very exciting time for CoPeace. Right now, we've recently embarked on the crowdfunding campaign available on WeFunder, where we are actually executing the next and most pivotal step of our development, which is to democratize investing for everyone. So what that means, it translates into is that anybody can make an investment in CoPeace through the WeFunder platform at a level that is manageable for many people, and have the opportunity to invest in things that were normally only available to high net worth individuals, institutions, private equity, venture capital. We have the opportunity now to make those sorts of investment opportunities available to the general public through the crowdfunding platform on WeFunder, where we have our campaign. The campaign is currently open to friends and family extended folks, so it has not received a lot of promotion yet. We'll be approaching the more public-facing phase of that in the coming week, and it's a very exciting time for us to be able to do one of the most important things that we said we were going to do, which is provide access to people to invest in companies with impact, companies that do good, and companies that are aligned with our mission, which is to grow our money for good, make the world a better place, and do things in a responsible way, both socially and environmental. So welcome all, and really look forward to hearing Romain's remarks today. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Next, I want to introduce Hanan Levine. He's our Chief Financial Officer here, based in Denver. We've had several folks ask us about having funds tied up in an IRA, and is that a potential source for investment? And I'm going to let Hanan kind of address that, because it's been a common question that we've had. So Hanan, pass it on to you.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, everybody. And I think this ties in perfectly to what Ed was saying. You know, our goal was to allow and give access to this type of investment to people through more traditional sources of investment that a lot of other people have access to in different stages in their life. So IRA is definitely one of them. And the answer is yes, you can invest through your IRA through the WeFunder platform. WeFunder has some recommended self-directed IRA platforms that support that. They can help you through that. but it's an allowable investment that you can directly invest through your IRA without any tax consequences. Obviously, we're not giving any tax advice, and you still have to consult with your own tax advisor. But from the mechanism perspective, it is an allowable investment that can be generated through your IRA, and it's a great diversification to when you're looking at long-term investments. I think if you look at CoPeace, it's a perfect investment for a long-term investment type of mechanism like the IRA, because our goal is to develop long-term value. And one small thing I wanted to add is that I'm very proud to be part of CoPeace and part of this WeFunder growth and access, being in the traditional financial industry for the past 16 days and seeing the inequality. And as we're seeing this wave of equality around us come in, being a part of a company that actually is taking steps toward solving that, I think is really monumental and something that I'm proud to be part of. So excited to allow access and provide access to different mechanisms. And I encourage everybody that has any questions about how to invest through the WeFunder platform to reach out to us. But as we've seen, it is very friendly. It's very easy, whether it's a checking account, credit card, IRA. The options are vast and easy to execute, and that was our goal. So I'm happy to say that we're definitely on the path to achieve that.
Great, thanks, Hanan. Last but not least, our fearless leader, Craig Jonas, our Chief Executive Officer and founder, also my good friend and neighbor. So go for it, Craig.
Thanks, Meg. Yeah, really appreciate everybody coming in today, and I am extremely excited to introduce Romain Vakilitabar, who has been somebody on the cutting edge of trying to make our world a better place through technology and media. I think that the timing of what Romain's is attempting to do could not be better. Our world, as Anand says, continues to become more and more unequal, and the inequality of everything is continuing to grow, and we're losing connections all over the place. And especially without the ability to be live, harnessing technology and media is critical for us to start to establish more empathic connections. So Romain has been somebody we've been connected to for a little while, and I want to hand it over to him. I think I think he'll talk about the survival of our species is actually is connected to the ability to have some more compassionate connections. So Romain is famous for liking gummy bears and watching people, and I think he's watched enough people that now he's able to start telling the story. So I'd like to turn it over to Romain and let you talk for a little bit, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. Your role, Romain. Yeah.
Thanks, Craig. Appreciate it. It's been really hard to people watch in confinements. Oh man.
Yeah.
But I've had my fair share of gummy bears, so hopefully that's balanced the equation a little bit. Hey, so such a pleasure to be here sharing a little bit more about the work that we're doing. I'm such a fan of CoPeace. I've been such a fan of Craig since I met him. Such a friendly guy who has such a beautiful vision. And excited to meet friends of CoPeace. Thank you for all that you're doing. Craig and I first connected a couple of years ago. We met at actually the Colorado Impact Days, which was fun. And the organization that I started called Pathos Labs. And at the core, Pathos is really focused on finding ways that media and technology and entertainment can be used as a really effective lever for social change. To begin, I just one really good story that helps encapsulate what I'm talking about is the fact that is the story of Manifest Destiny. And for anyone who's a history fan, you probably know all about Manifest Destiny. I was awful at history in high school. but I just was reading about Manifest Destiny not too long ago, and it really stuck with me because Manifest Destiny was this story that was told that completely changed human behavior. It was a story that, I mean, concretely, it was a perilous journey where probably, you know, a fourth of the people who would embark upon this journey would probably die at some point within the first couple of years. It was a journey where you'd have to probably brutally kill indigenous people along the way. But yet so many people embarked upon this journey, and why? And it was this beautiful, sincere story, Manifest Destiny, this beautiful mission to redeem the old problematic world and create a heaven in a new world. And so many people were willing and able to embark upon this journey despite the certain costs, the obvious costs of engaging within it. And so Manifest Destiny it really stuck with me because, you know, our world and our sense of reality is constructed by a story. And sometimes those stories are beautiful. Sometimes they're problematic, and sometimes they're both. Like Manifest Destiny had a huge cost. And I think the estimate is about 10 million Native people were brutalized and slaughtered for the sake of creating this, you know, new world, this heaven in a new land. And so our world is constructed by stories, and yet the stories that are being told are really harming our potential, are not predisposing us to hope, to a sense of understanding as far as what is possible, what could be, as opposed to what is. I've been thinking a lot about different stories as it relates to political polarization. Right now, we're hearing so many stories as far as how there's nothing that we have in common with our political counterparts, individuals who have different political views than ourselves. And as a result, that reality has become the case where we're seeing political gridlock, where we're seeing people unwilling to have conversations across the political aisle, and politicians included. Unwilling to compromise, unwilling to have meaningful engagements with those with alternative political views. So what do we do? What do we do when the stories that are being told are the stories of divisiveness, of discord, of hatred, of chaos? So Pathos Labs is really a laboratory where we're trying to figure out ways that technology, entertainment, media can help manufacture a better world through the stories that we tell, through the experiences that we build. So when we first started, we did a lot with virtual reality. And really what felt so promising to me about virtual reality was not the technology itself, but the fact that VR was a Trojan horse for meaningful storytelling. And what I mean by that is we told a story about 3 women. And this was a virtual reality story. We worked with Google on this project, and Google helped distribute it. Google gave us some of their best technology to tell it. But it was a story of 3 women. One was a Black Lives Matter activist in St. Louis. Another was an Iraqi refugee, actually in Thornton, Colorado. And the third was a farmer in rural Oklahoma. And these individuals had nothing in common on the surface. They had different religions, different political views, different different nationalities in different parts of the country, and yet we told a story that united them. The story about what it's like to be a mother in America, to want a better future for your kids, and so it was a story that we thought it was 8 minutes long. We thought it was well told. But ultimately, who's going to watch a story like that, focused on unity and bringing people together? You know, if we were to post it on YouTube or put it on our Facebook page, probably just the fans, the people who care about unity, would probably engage with content like that. But because we housed it in a virtual reality headset, we were then able to take it to different parts of the country where people waited in line for hours to experience it, not because of the content itself, but because of the technology. And so one cool visual was we were in rural Oklahoma, and we had a line of probably 45 minutes long of people who were waiting in line. And we were in a very conservative, very homogenous part of the country. And they were waiting in line to try on this virtual reality headset. And, you know, they put it on, and all of a sudden they're standing in the living room of an Iraqi refugee, of a Black Lives Matter activist, and seeing how that narrative is similar to their own. Seeing, you know, one of their neighbors, this woman named Judy, who was one of the women in the story, talk about, you know, like farming in the land in Oklahoma. And so we're challenging this in-group, out-group association, right? When people see themselves in others, then they tend to feel less vitriolic, less hateful. And so it was really cool experiments where these individuals would take off the headset and have a slightly different perspective on individuals who they've been primed to disagree with and hate, that they've heard through the media content that they consume. So, you know, that was one of the experiments that Pathos Labs tested a couple of years ago. That was in 2017. So it was January, right as President Trump got inaugurated. And so, yeah, that was one example. And now what we're doing is we are actually, before I do that, I'll show you a video that we created. This was actually, we did another virtual reality experiment. And this was trying to put people face to face with the idea of other. And really the idea there was, you know, if you're face to face with individuals who have different identities that you don't maybe come across on a day-to-day basis in your community, through a moment of intimate interaction, face to face with this individual, maybe that's enough to challenge some of your prejudicial tendencies, biased belief systems, stereotypes that you may have as it relates to them. So this piece is called The Other. Craig wanted me to show some of my work, so figure I can pull that up. This isn't going to be virtual reality, obviously, because you need a headset for it, but we created a desktop version, and it's not super gimmicky. It's not really fancy technology necessarily. It's really supposed to, the VR is really supposed to immerse you and place you face to face with these individuals who you will see. And there's a little backstory. So let me set this up. I'm gonna share my screen. And then share computer sound. All right, let's do this. Can you all see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can you hear it okay too?
Yep.
If I only had 2 minutes to tell you about myself, this is what I'd say.
I grew up mostly with my dad as a single father. My mom passed away. So I was raised by my grandparents.
I grew up very poor.
Very beautiful, very wealthy.
Kind of lower middle class.
And my dream was always to leave this little village and go to the big city.
I grew up watching my parents be entrepreneurs.
They got divorced when I was 10 due to my father's
It's a private school?
Public school.
But then it became cheated me. Appreciated it. Really felt for it.
Myself. Who am I? Do I believe?
To find me.
I think we lost him here.
Did we lose him? Okay, yeah, okay.
It was buffering a little bit, Roman. We'll share that. That's great stuff.
It is. Oh, is he back in? Hold on, let me unmute him.
Okay, hey, sorry about that.
Oh, you're good.
I could hear that. Do you just want to send it afterwards? Is that
Yeah,
good?
we will.
Yeah,
we'll do
we can do that.
Okay.
It was a good start though. The chills were already started going, so appreciate you.
And by the way, I realized one of the producers is in on this call as well. Pavel Repo
Nice.
is on the line, and so he was hugely helpful. He was the one who interviewed most of these individuals and really helped pull out some of their really like meaningful, vulnerable parts of their stories. And so he's an incredible individual and was so lucky to get the chance to work with him. So anyways, that gives you an idea as far as some of the stories that we try to tell, the stories that we think can unite us, can challenge maybe some of the biased belief systems, the stereotypes. With that piece in particular, you may have noticed that the visuals don't necessarily always mirror the voices, and that was a deliberate decision to try to obfuscate how maybe like this is just a story of humans in general. It doesn't necessarily matter whose voice went with whose face, you know, and we also felt like that was a powerful way to try to undo some of the stereotypes. And so that was a project called The Other, which we did in 2018. So now what Pathos Labs has really been focused on is rather than creating content of our own, there have been a couple case studies that really spoke to us about the power of scripted perception of challenging, maybe hateful rhetoric. I heard a year ago, has nothing to do with hate specifically, but I heard this story through, I forget who it was, but a Harvard professor of public health was trying to figure out how to reduce of driving. And he ended up working with the and Cosby Show, in the like two of the most popular shows in the 80s. Introduced one of their shows. And so the show wasn't about it was simply introduced. And over the course of, you know, a couple of days, it became a part of the culture. Ways that human behavior all over the world. And now it's hard to imagine the designated drivers. So thanks to just the simple introduction of human behavior was changed on a massive scale, and probably I can't even imagine how many lives have been spared because of this new concept. So so we've been working with several TV writers, creators of wildly popular TV shows, to try to figure out what are some new concepts that we can introduce that can become part of the cultural vanguard, that can hopefully shift human behavior in a meaningful direction. We've been doing some work on depolarization. So how can a scripted, and we're working with the creators of the second most popular comedy sitcom on television today. And we've been trying to think about what does depolarization look like? How can we leverage the fact that this piece of content every week is getting 8 to 10 million people tuning in? How do we introduce concepts that can really challenge our propensity towards polarization? So that's been a really fascinating project. We've been working with 7 depolarization experts, academics who have studied what it takes to depolarize. And so we've been building out different interventions that the writers of this TV show are going to be introducing in their contents. So that's exciting. We also are spending a bit of time putting together this summit. It's called the Pop Shift Summit, where we're going to be convening some of the leading TV writers, film writers, as well as some of the leading behavioral scientists, diversity, equity, inclusion practitioners, to come together and understand, how do we simulate a sort of writer's room for America's future? How do we make the future that we want feel possible? And obviously, if you can see that future, if you can imagine that future, then all of a sudden it becomes more tenable. So that is the concept where the summit was actually supposed to happen in LA last week. But because of COVID, we couldn't have an in-person meeting. So instead we're going to be doing a virtual event, which, is a bummer, but also has its advantages in the sense that we can bring together probably more people. It's a lot less expensive to produce that event. And so we're planning to have 50 leading TV writers, 50 leading experts, conflict resolution leaders, truth and reconciliation experts, diversity, equity, inclusion leaders, to come together and try to figure out, how do we write into existence through the fictional scripted content and TV shows that people engage with. How do we write into existence the future that we wish to see for ourselves and for future generations? So anyways, that's a little bit about the work that we're doing at Pathos. I mean, I'm so excited by the work that CoPeace is doing, largely because the idea of capitalism I think is also this story that's been told, and you're telling a different story. You're telling the future story of capitalism, from this zero-sum story, lender versus borrower, scarcity, me versus you, money you can make, but in doing so will ruin the world, versus, okay, maybe you can have a meaningful impact, but you won't make a dime off of it. I think CoPeace is on the forefront of telling a new story as far as what can happen, and how we can really leverage access to really create a more equitable and peaceful future. So I'm honored to be in your midst today, and yeah, keep telling that beautiful story, because the world definitely needs it.
Roman, thank you so much. can't imagine your timing and trying to help craft a better story could be better. I mean, as we try to restart things, you know, I would imagine that there's a lot of people in Hollywood that are listening to you now more than probably they were even a couple months ago. And so it's, I think, hopefully your ability to tell the perspective of the other and realize that we're all the same is something that, you know, a lot of people in the United States don't get to experience live. I mean, people don't get to travel internationally in general from a lot of communities. But if you can bring that story of the other and the you know, so many things we have in common, that is such a hopeful perspective today. And if you can start, you know, continue to enlighten you know, so many communities about the story you're telling, I think it's outstanding timing. And really appreciate you being here. Your internet broke up a little bit in there, so I think people got most of it, but I'll open it up for some questions.
I'll kick it off. I have a question. This is Meg. Thanks, Roman. That was incredibly inspiring. Sort of just something that struck me. Have you brought your technology, your storytelling, your message to the younger generation, particularly in schools and the educational system? And I think, I don't know, let me just pose that question and see what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, we have. We've taken a couple of our virtual reality experiences specifically to classrooms, and not to the scale that we would have liked. But we have, and it's really cool to see younger kids, and this is like probably like 5th grade or so, experience this content. They get really enthused by it, and it's really blows their minds, which is really fun to see. One of the pieces that we created that we did take to quite a few schools, just because it's a little bit more accessible, like the subject matter is a little bit more accessible than, you know, talking about polarization or kind of a little bit more esoteric kind of storytelling that may not be really too relatable to a 5th grader. But we did one piece in what's known to be Africa's largest slum in Kenya. And really the point of it was to challenge the Western world's perception of Africa being this poverty-stricken land where we look down upon them or pity them or feel sad. Beautiful home. And even though it takes place in what's known to be Africa's largest slum, the story exists within through the perspective of and okay.
Oh, you're cutting up just a little bit, Roman.
Yeah, I think we're losing it just a bit, Roman. We will send out in the chat right now. You can see a link.
Hey, can you hear me?
Site. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. That was helpful.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. I changed my internet. Hopefully that'll be better. But so yeah, it takes place in the shoes of this this girl who points out the beauty that she sees within her community, and certainly it's easy to see the fact that there's maybe a little bit more trash on the sides, that there isn't the infrastructure that there is in the United States. Really, the point of it is to step into her community from her own perspective and see the beauty. And almost forcibly, you know, push that onto individuals. So it was something that was obviously very accessible, not just for kids, but we took that to film festivals all over the world and got some awards for that one, which was really exciting because at the time I had never created a virtual reality experience before. I had built my own virtual reality camera system. Wow. On weekends after, after the work week, and 3D printed parts, and got modular cameras that we plugged into this like 3D mold, and so a production company had heard about that, and they sent me to Kenya to do a project with them, really focused on this company called Lucy, which they do solar lights. You may have seen them at REI, but they're these like blow up solar lights. But anyways, while I was there, I ended up working with the community to tell a story from their vantage point that really challenged a lot of the stereotypes that people hold, the stories that people tell about that community. So that was a piece that we did take to elementary schools, and it was cool to see their reaction, to see how they could actually identify the beautiful parts of that community, the differences in the community for sure, but recognize those differences as being beautiful differences. And the point of dignifying those who've been almost systemically undignified is definitely something that I've been excited about doing. So yeah, there was a great reaction amongst the kids that got the chance to see that. Thanks for asking.
I've watched that video, and it is it's outstanding. You don't need a lot of material things to be happy. So it's definitely challenging to a lot of kind of the American ideal of happiness. So yeah, that's powerful storytelling for sure.
Let's open it up.
Questions?
Any of our guests on the call have a question for Roman? Feel free.
I had a question. I'm not a guest, but I'm going to talk anyways. Roman, first of all, really interesting aspects. Love your idea, especially somebody that's coming from Israel that had to educate all of my buddies that I didn't ride a camel to school. Half joking, but not really. I think it's an interesting perspective. I wanted to know if you ever, especially knowing the intricacies of a conflict that is outside of the U.S., the Israel-Palestinian conflict. I was wondering if you were I'm sure you were thinking of it, right? But is that the direction that you're going of? How is that something that you were thinking about? Is showing conflicts from actually finally a neutral perspective without an agenda through the eyes? I think that's the only way to solve conflict. But is that I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts about even taking it to kind of the next step to conflicts. And there's so many of them. And I think the other issue that I see is there's so many conflicts we're not aware of even. There's genocides happening, there's issues happening within these small countries that just are not coming to our attention. So what's kind of your thoughts or strategy around highlighting that?
Yeah, great question, Hanan. It's a great question because I've thought about that a lot. And in the last couple of years, I've really narrowed my aperture a little bit to focus on the United States in the stories that we tell. And largely for several reasons. One, I don't want to appropriate values when I go to other countries or contexts that have a different culture. And it's hard for me to do that, right? It's hard for me to go somewhere that I'm not necessarily familiar with the intricacies of that culture, of the history, to say, oh, this is, how to solve it. And I guess I know you didn't say that it has to be solutions oriented necessarily, but I think it's really important. There was one story I heard, it was about the United Nations who they created this program in Somalia to reduce the perception of violence amongst its people, to reduce the fear of Al-Shabaab amongst its people. And they created a sort of American Idol, but it was, I forget what it was called. Obviously it wasn't called American Idol, but it was a show where people were celebrating their culture publicly on TV. It was a sort of competition where there were singers who were competing against each other, poets who were competing against each other. And, you know, the reason for that is because people were afraid of singing in public. People were afraid of even listening to music in public because of, you know, possible repercussions with Al-Shabaab. And so the United Nations decided to, you know, engineer a norm of social acceptance around singing and celebrating culture publicly. It's an interesting case study because it's had a positive results, but the deeper story is it ethical for a foreign agency like the United Nations to do something like that across the world? And it gets kind of tricky, you know, it's hairy because on the surface, I want to be like, yes, that was great. And I'm happy they did that. But at the same time, if you apply that to other contexts, it can very quickly get kind of tenuous and maybe not super ethical as far as like, what's the culture you're trying to appropriate? You know, what values are you trying to push upon people? You know, like even in the social enterprise space, I did a lot with social entrepreneurs around the world before the work before the work at Pathos. And to some extent, it's pushing this idea of capitalism capitalism being equal to happiness in a lot of these cultures where that may not necessarily be the case. And so I've seen a lot of social entrepreneurs with really good intentions actually maybe kind of disrupt the equilibrium of communities and cultures that they're not as familiar with, right? So I've backpacked between Israel and Palestine myself in 2015, and this was after the war in Gaza. Because I was curious about learning about it for myself and interviewed people on both sides, not on camera, but just, you know, because I was curious about it personally. But I think, yeah, I think it just gets a little tricky as far as like, I don't want to be an outsider coming in and prescribing, you know, solutions or telling people what to think or how to behave towards one another, because there is a lot of hatred and anger there, but, you know, I don't necessarily have that embodied experience as far as dealing with certain injustices that people on both sides have had to deal with, you know? And so that said, I would really love to support someone on the ground, you know, if I can help them out in whatever capacity, if I can decenter my own voice to really let them step in and provide any support, whether it's tech support or whatever, I'd be there for them for sure. So hopefully that helped answer.
That was great. No, that was a good answer. We talk a lot, especially I think our young people are very careful to keep us walking the walk on the authenticity game. So I think what you're suggesting is kind of in parallel with what we are trying to also accomplish and make sure that we are careful with our voice and continue to be as authentic as we can. I think, Meg, we should really deeply appreciate your time, Roman. You were outstanding. I think really,
a real pleasure.
You're doing important work. We will have your link that we share with everybody beyond the people in here in our community, and we're definitely cheering you on and looking forward to continue to talk about how we can do some things together, because a lot of us come from the media world. We've got actually some people here that were part of the whole virtual reality setup in some podcasts.
Cool.
So yeah, we've got you know, strong connections in the media world. So look forward to continuing our conversation, and thank you for sharing today.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everyone. I want to thank you, Roman. Thanks to all of our guests. Our intention is to continue having these informal coffees once a month. So look for that coming up in July again. And
it'll feel like next week. It'll feel like it's next week.
Oh my gosh, I know, right? Yeah, so everyone stay safe, stay well, take care of one another, and we'll hope to see you at the end of July.